Welcome to Inclusive Conversations, Empowering Voices, a program celebrating and promoting equity, diversity, and inclusion, produced by the NSERC Create programs, TABES, and Smart Art, in association with the Lausanne School of Engineering at York University. I'm your host, Tim Hampton. Today's guest is Dr. Dawn Bazely. Dawn is a full professor in the Department of Biology in the Faculty of Science at York University. Her research areas include ecology and evolutionary biology. Today we are going to discuss her work as a researcher and professor, environmental sustainability, and the importance of diversity. Dawn, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tim. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's my delight. Dawn, where are you today?
I'm actually in Germany, in Bonn, at the United Nations campus, attending the plenary session of the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, which is Canada is part of it. I chatted with some of the official government delegates. They're from the federal government. We are here as observers because York University has observer status. I was last here in these buildings 6 years ago for the climate change negotiations, the annual conference of the party. There were about 22,000 people here. This time, it's really chill. There's only about 700. This is a small meeting.
That's good. Well, thank you for joining me from all that far away. What drew you to the subjects of ecology and evolutionary biology?
It's a pretty simple answer. I like flowers and birds. So I was born in India. My family is Anglo-Indian, mixed race, going back like 250 years to the colonization of India by the East India Company in the British Empire. And my parents emigrated so my first citizenship was India. When I was about 1.5, my parents emigrated to England, and I lived in London until I was 14. And then my parents emigrated to Canada, where I did some high school and then went to University of Toronto. And while I was growing up in England, I just really liked, even living in a city, I was always observing and noticing things. And so I liked that. And there were lots of cool TV shows. You know, David Attenborough, who's still on TV. I grew up with him. He would have been in his 40s then, you know. It was just wonderful to watch. But I also had an inspirational school trip when I was 8 years old. A young teacher who was a fill-in teacher. He was originally from, I think, Kenya or Tanzania. He took us to the Natural History Museum in London with the dinosaurs and everything. And I thought that was amazing. So that really solidified this lifelong interest. And of course, when I got to university, I was trying to figure out how could you actually have a career. I didn't know that you could have a career. I did not know growing up that there was a career title called ecologist.
So what can ecology teach us about the world?
Everything. So I would like to take this opportunity to apologize to my colleagues in the economics department because I'm going to trash talk you very briefly. So when it comes to systems thinking, ecology is kind of the mothership of all of that. It's even the mothership of systems thinking in engineering. And ecology looks at how the world is organized. We count things, a lot of counting in ecology. So one thing that is often done is you count the number of plants or animals or bugs or viruses and try and figure out whether the population numbers are changing or going up and down. But the other thing that ecology does is it fits that biotic or biological component of the world ecosystem into boxes that connect to the abiotic, so rock and air and water. and connects everything with arrows. So, and tries to figure out what's driving everything. So when it comes to thinking of systems, ecologists love a flowchart. We like that. We do population biology, and we would also be looking at individual organisms and how they interact with the environment and how the environment might be affecting the physiology or the genetics. So ecology is actually... So when economists talk about the global economy in terms of all the different boxes, that's ecology thinking. When engineers talk about the built environment in terms of connecting boxes, that's also ecology thinking. And what you very soon learn about ecology is there's so many moving parts to what's going on. You have to have your eye on the prize. And it's not possible to be very narrowly focused in ecology. Sometimes you have to be narrowly focused, like I study this one grass and the leaf on the grass. But you also have to be putting that into the bigger picture. So, and the other scales, which makes ecology a challenging subject, because an observation that something you might see going on within a small population or group or place may actually be being caused by something that's happening at a completely different scale. If you missing that, you actually miss what was really causing. So ecology is always looking for cause and effect. And we have devised all kinds of approaches to do it. So I guess I would say, if you never want to be bored in your entire lifetime, do ecology, because you will never answer the research question.
Right. Yes, there's always another question to be found.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you were at the climate change conference known as COP23. Did that experience make you hopeful about humanity's effort to address climate change?
That's a great question. So, the world is burning this summer. So much of what scientists predicted from the research exercises, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the big reports 30 years ago, is now coming to happen. So the question is, am I hopeful? So I would say, honestly, you can't not be hopeful. I mean, we are educators. You and I, we're educators. We got to drink the Kool-Aid that educating people is going to make a difference. So in that regard, we have to believe that these inclusive multilateral processes, bringing the world together in the same room, is going to make a difference. Having said that, I just came out of very interesting session, a side event hosted by the United States Special Envoy on Indigenous Peoples. The professor who hosted it, he's Anishinaabe, he's Potawatomi. He actually mentioned that he is very familiar with York University. There are Indigenous colleagues who he says were important mentors to him. Professor Deb McGregor, she is in the Faculty of Law, Osgoode Hall. He said, I said, wow, okay, small world. So he had a room, there were about 45 people in the room, maybe 15 or 20 Indigenous representatives from everywhere, Africa, Asia, North America, the Arctic. They were there to talk about how important it is to include Indigenous voices in these conversations about biodiversity and ecosystems. And and many of them have been advocating in the space for decades, and yet they maintain positive outlooks. So it is inspirational to be in a room where people are talking about the many hurdles that have had to be overcome, and yet you see people are still showing up to the spaces to have the dialogue. So I would say, as much as we're dealing with very serious global issues, I feel there is energy. There's a lot of youth here, these young students from all over the world. I just met a delegation who have made a forest reserve in Ecuador. They're in their early 20s. It's a non-governmental organization. So you get the goods on how bad things are from the science, but you also are in a space with people who are working to halt declines and improve them. It's pretty nice. It's a pretty nice vibe.
Yes. What can universities do to enhance public understanding of science?
I had that conversation the other day with the head of the media relations here. What we can do is make sure that we, both professors and students and our staff, because York has a lot of highly qualified staff like yourself, that we all are, I think, supported by the institution and supporting each other to bring the intellectual, without over making people feel threatened, but bring the nuance of the information and the research into the public domain. Well, many public domains, and educate and train. We'll just really push our mission of education. I think that is our mission, really, isn't it? Is not just to teach students inside the ivory tower, but to create the spaces where those conversations move outside the ivory tower, as well as to walk the talk to reflect the real world, which I think York does a pretty good job of that, which is why I've been a professor there for decades now. It really is the kind of diverse and inclusive space, or is trying to be. There's always issues that I would want to be a part of.
So one of the probably most interesting periods of your years teaching was the COVID lockdowns. How did the experience of teaching during a lockdown affect your views on online teaching?
Yes, funny. I know we had done some preparation conversation, but actually, I've actually been talking about all these issues in this week while I've been in these meetings here, because there's other professors here from other universities around the world. There's people from NGOs, there's students, there are country delegates. My hotel, we have the Nigerian delegation who the country delegation. They're all foresters. They're all trained in forestry. It's super fun. You see them at breakfast. Like it really is just so fun. And we've actually been comparing notes about the past 3 years and how it's been. So one of the things that happened very quickly at the beginning of the pandemic was that, because I'm an ecologist and I work on invasive species, and I was teaching an invasive ecology or an applied ecology course that covers invasions, I always look for real world examples of invasive species, for example, just case studies we can cover in the course. And very, very soon, like in the second week or the first week, I knew that there was this mystery illness coming out of China, and it was moving fast, and it seemed to be centered around a wildlife market. So you immediately think zoonotic diseases, and that climate change is causing more diseases to reach more corners of the world. So I knew what was coming. We were tracking it in the class, and I was preparing students to finish the term online, I think ahead of any other of their professors, including the ones taking the virology course, because they were taking both courses. And we had to cancel all our in-person field courses for Ontario. 16 of our universities share our spaces on our courses, and we send students worldwide. A student at York can apply to take a field course in East Africa. They can go to the Arctic. They can go to the Caribbean and do scuba diving. They can go to Courtright Conservation Area just north of Toronto. And there's price points for everyone, but it's this like 2-week immersive experience. We had to cancel all of those very early on because reservations were being made, travel arrangements. So we did that, and then I realized that we then had about 40 students who now didn't have a field course, and a lot of those students were counting on that course credit to meet their convocation requirements for the fall. So with the support of my good friend and colleague and department chair, Professor Rob Tashima, I said, we need to do a virtual course. We're all in lockdown, and I think we're going to do frugal innovation, which is very engineering kind of approach out of India, where you blend old methods with new methods, and it's all inexpensive and affordable. And let's make a little kit that we could just mail out, and let's design an indoor biome lockdown field course. So we did that. And you get all your friends. So we did that, and we had, I think, 24 students took it that year, which means that we had a lot of virtual convocations. So we were able to provide something for students. We could do that. The next year, we didn't have in-person field courses again, and we collaborated with Guelph University, and we had about 48 or 50 students take the course because students needed courses, and we were all in lockdown. So we gave them these little $3 origami microscopes. We sent seeds and soil. We sent them a kit where you could literally run your experiments, and we used the power of the internet for students to collaborate virtually. Now, people have heard of the digital divide, which is right now I'm in a place with great internet, but when I'm in the Arctic, unless you have a satellite phone, you're really locked out of the internet. And we know there's many distant areas of Canada that have very poor internet coverage. You know, there's this whole question, is access to high-speed internet a human right, given that this is infrastructure? You know, we should have good roads, we should have clean water, we should have digital infrastructure. And this is difficult because Canada is so big. Mm-hmm. So I'm always very mindful of that. So I did design a lot of the content to be very slim in size, that could be downloaded and that wasn't data heavy. It seemed to work for most people. And we actually still do that virtual field course because York has got a lot of students who are like, they're working. Mm-hmm. So the idea of doing virtual field course works for a lot of students who can't get away for a 2-week residential course, maybe for financial reasons. So we've actually still, we just taught that course, and I've handed it over to another course director. It's the 4th year, and it's still very popular. So it meets the needs of some students, and we've gone back to the in-person field courses. So we actually had one of my colleagues taught one of these shared field courses in Algonquin Park birds. So I'm looking forward to handing over that portfolio of field courses after 8 years and guiding us through pandemic online teaching. And I think the good thing is that we kind of kept interest alive. And I've even we did a lot of just learning how to use online teaching tools. And I think in the future, I mean, I certainly keep all of my courses hybrid. So even though I'm in the room, people can come in the room. It just is like at this conference, there are 2 delegates from York University who could not come in person for various personal reasons. They are Zooming in. Mm-hmm. So the United Nations, I don't know, what do you think, Tim? Do you think hybrid is here to stay?
Well, I think that it has so many advantages. I mean, some of the things you pointed out, like people with family obligations or financial obligations who can't make the trek necessarily, can still participate. But then on top of that, the catchment area for York is so much bigger. You know, potentially people who want to summer at home, wherever home may be, can participate. And also, you know, the collaborations that are possible. You know, you literally can collaborate with anybody in the world. I mean, you and I have yet to meet in person, and here we are having this terrific conversation. So it is magic, and you know, there's nothing quite like the social interaction that's possible in person. Seeing that person at breakfast, but you know, it just makes the world so much bigger that I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, so I'm really seeing the students here who've been like in lockdown kind of for 2 years, and it's one of my PhD students. So she hasn't been to an in-person conference since like 2018, 2019, and I really wanted her to have that experience before she defended her doctorate and graduated from York. And at first it was really difficult for her because she just had been so isolated. So I've been here with her to introduce her and help her to meet people, and she's having fun. She had fun. Like she's learned so much, and that kind of, well, Tim, right, that the most important conversations at conferences happen at coffee, not in the meeting room.
I'm sure. Yeah, that's where the real negotiations happen. The advent of COVID, the whole lockdown, highlights how quickly the world can change. How can universities help students prepare for a future that might be dramatically different from the circumstances today?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. Number one, I believe that we treat young people with the respect that they deserve as people with agency who can make decisions, who can be trusted, who can learn to be lifelong learners and can be given the confidence to make mistakes, to understand that nothing is going to be perfect the first few times or even the first 30 times, but you just keep going. So I think that this is what I would think is really fundamental in quote future-proofing, creating resilience, is giving them the tools to be flexible. I think one of the most important things is to trust each other. I'm really in favor of group projects and the kinds of assignments where everyone sees everybody's little pecha-kucha 6.5-minute talk, where we give them really good guidelines. And students, and the main thing is, I think students often have a bit of a dim view of their fellow students. They're like, well, I don't think they're that good. And to get them to trust each other and respect each other. So I do a lot of that kind of thing in all of my courses. And I always say to students, what am I going to learn from you? Because they're like, oh, you're the professor. I'm like, well, I am, but I don't know everything. So even since I've been here, we were all out last night at a local pub having a drink, non-alcoholic and alcoholic beers. It's Germany, so I could afford to pick up the tab for all the students who came out. I said to them, I'd never do that in Toronto because it's really become more expensive. So we were all, I said, everyone, we've all got these name tags. We should be able to, I can't remember everybody's name. And then somebody said, oh, they gave us these pins. Just pin through your lanyard. And then they were so inventive. I was like, oh my God, I never thought of that.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
And I was like, as a student, just give students trust and power and rules around using it. And my other main thing I have to say in my group projects is they have to be kind to each other. Mm-hmm. Be kind.
Yeah, crisis is hard enough without us, knocking each other over the head, definitely.
You have to help people. And it's so easy to help people, isn't it? It's actually easier than not helping people. I don't know. I'm always like, it's just so easy. It doesn't mean that you have to run out and do some big thing, but just simply acknowledging people's presence and thanking them and saying thank you. I'm like, so many people just say thank you, and just build a good sense of community. I think that's what we really need moving forward. We have to have people feel connected. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's really essential for students' mental health that they have the skill set to make connections and give them the confidence.
So
that's enough. Go whittering on about that. Be kind, build confidence.
Yeah, I think those are great tips. I mean, basically, it boils down to that if you have the confidence to not necessarily have the right answer, but experiment and work with other people, then that, you can address almost anything. So In the intro, I introduced the idea that you were that the podcast was sponsored by TABES, which stands for Training in Applied Biology for Environmental Sustainability, which is a program at York University. What drew you to that program?
That's a really good question. Well, my friend Satinda Brav, who is a professor, she said, you should be part of this. Actually, it's I think the last word, S, is sustainability. So I actually was the director of the now defunct Research Institute in Sustainability for 7 of 8 years that I had a gap year of sabbatical. So because I did that, sustainability is such a broad topic that a lot of people won't actually say they're an expert in it, because in universities our expertise is so narrow, and sustainability is such a kind of a big picture idea, but it fits really well with what ecological big picture thinking does. So that's really what it was, is I was someone with a sustainability background. It just so happens that my actual research is looking at nature-based solutions to climate change. We don't have to engineer them. We already have trees and plants and native biodiversity. So one of the things we're very interested in at this conference is bringing forward ideas about financial mechanisms. And again, sustainability is environment, economics, and ethics. I guess that's the be kind to people and inclusive leg of the stool. But we're really interested in how you can actually foster the kind of sustainability, social enterprise thinking that will produce or create the kind of solutions that one might need moving forward. So TABES is great because it really encourages students to do like entrepreneurial thinking, being applied. I've always been an applied ecologist. Like my research from the first time I stepped into the field was about managing snow geese populations. So I'm even though I have some pretty esoteric academic research interests, they are related. They're in the context of really applied research. So somebody usually wants to know some of my research output. So I was a good fit with the industrial stream, Grant, and the engineers who are trying to solve problems.
I can't resist asking, because it's like meeting a celebrity when I speak with a guest, because I've done so much research on them. And one of the papers I came across, speaking of esoteric, had something to do with, I think it was lesser geese. Do you remember the title of
Lesser snow geese and the nitrogen economy of a grazed salt marsh, possibly. Or poo.
That sounds about right. And I was just wondering if the better geese refused your call or something. Why the lesser?
The greater snow geese.
The greater snow geese. Yeah.
There's two snow geese species, lesser snow geese and greater snow geese, and one is slightly larger than the other. It really is just like size. And I was up in the Arctic near Bylot Island in Nunavut, just across from Mutalik Pond Inlet. It's actually the home to Surmullik, a national park. And my colleague, Gilles Gauthier, has studied greater snow geese there since the 1980s. And so
it was the lesser snow geese's turn.
Yeah, really. I was like, oh, Gilles and his great. And I've never seen them there because they're like nesting. So I have seen them flying, the greater flying around. You know what? I can't tell the difference.
From a distance, who can tell from size, right? Yeah, exactly.
So it is lesser snow geese, yes.
So you were born in India, as you said, grew up in the UK and now live in Canada. How have these different experiences impacted your thinking about equity and inclusion?
That's a really good question. I had an interesting conversation the other day with a young woman from Senegal who's doing her PhD in Zurich. And we were chatting. And then I said to her, I'm not really white, She said, oh, you look really white. And I said, yeah, that's because I'm kind of a bit faded. But that, I have had the experience of growing up in London, where people would say, well, where are you from? You'd say this part of London. And then they would say, but where are you really from? So in terms of not feeling really part of that community. I've had that experience, and I think that it really. And also I grew up in a very diverse social situation because my family knew lots of immigrants to the UK, very diverse. So I was in a house that was decidedly bringing together people from all parts of the Commonwealth, British Empire. So I think that was a very different experience than someone. And I knew that I wasn't born in England. I would say I'm born in India. People and then coming to Canada as a teenager, right in the 1970s, and the full-blown era of multiculturalism under Pierre Trudeau. I loved it. I just loved celebrating all the different cultures. And in my high school, we did learn about residential schools and land claims in Canada. So I was really exposed to everything that was there. And I just loved it, and food and culture and movies and language. And I think that has influenced me going forward to want to come back after being in the UK I went back for a doctorate. But I always wanted to come back to Canada, and I always really wanted to come back to York University, honestly, because it was just so much of this diversity. And one of the rooms I sat in this morning, the Indigenous Peoples consultation with the American envoy from the State Department, the Sami representative, they're from northern Scandinavia, Lapland, you would say, reindeer herders. The representative, he said, well, there's a lot of research that shows that biocultural diversity helps with maintaining biological diversity. So the more languages, the more cultures, that there are relationships between policies that maintain diversity at all levels. I thought that was really
fascinating.
interesting.
Let me pick at that. So you mean one theory that comes to mind is if I eat different foods, I'm going to demand different foods, which means the farmers locally will grow different foods. Is that sort of what you're getting? That type of mechanism?
So that could be one of them, that you're diversifying your food base, because at the end of the day, although we have 350,000 species of flowering plants, most of the world's calories are provided by industrial agriculture based around 14 main species.
Wheat, like
soybeans and corn and potatoes. Bananas, they're one of the huge crops. And of course, if an invasive organism like a plant disease sweeps through, and we're planting cultivars that are genetically homogeneous, this isn't very good. So I think that's part. I think your thinking there is definitely part of it. Also, there was a comment that in the Sami language, there are, like in Inuktitut, the Inuit languages, there are 300 words for snow. So if you can preserve all of this, it gives you tools to think about how to manage environments, because you're thinking about the environment in a different way. Then there was a very good discussion about how one handles this diversity of thought, because organizations want to be more linear and fit everything into a shoebox. So there is a tension, definitely, in all of this stuff. And like a lot of people have said to me here and in other groups I work with, like, we wish you could stay here and, you're irreplaceable. So I said I'm going to get a t-shirt that says no one is irreplaceable. And what I really want to do is train up and contribute to the next generation of young people who will do what I do, and they'll do it better than me. And everyone says, oh no. And I go, oh, come on. Of course you're going to be better than me, and seed that power. So I'm actually spending a lot of time thinking these days to go back to Tabes. Training is really, we need to train, like, I'm not going to die with all of my knowledge dying with me. I want to give the experience to as many people and open it up in open access and make things available through the York repository, take it out from behind paywalls. So I'm one of these people that believes that everyone should be given a voice at the table and trained how to do it. I don't mind, because I don't believe I have the answers. I don't believe, right?
So I think that people who drive in Toronto have 300 phrases to describe snow, and they all start with F.
By the way, you do know that Toronto traffic is like the worst in North America, right?
I don't know if is LA still not
no, apparently. Here's data. The average commute to Toronto, if for people in a car, is like an hour, and which apparently puts us at the top of the list. Maybe people in LA just gave up.
Yeah, maybe.
Can I just say that when I was hired at York University in 1989, they said, there's going to be a subway coming here soon. I was like, which opened 27 years later. So I had to stick around that long to see that subway.
Although at the time, York University was kind of surrounded by farmland. It wasn't quite so hard to commute. Yeah.
Yeah. No, things have really changed.
So turning back to, we've talked a little bit about biodiversity and diversity of experience and so on. How can universities create an environment where diverse backgrounds and diverse ways of thought are not just welcome, but valued? We have a few minutes.
That's a good question. I'll just say you have to, that's really, literally that question is being discussed here right now. It's like, how do we do that? How do we make sure? I think we have to train and educate the people who hold power and hold access to the platform to understand why this strengthens the entire system. So coming back to systems thinking, if you want to stabilize systems and make them more resilient, there's a huge amount of research, as you know, that shows that the more voices and diverse points of view you have, the more the stronger or better any kind of project or enterprise is likely to be. There's multiple projects looked at different measures of all that sort of thing, but I would say that the most important thing there is that the people in the university, like faculty, professors, really need to be trained. And in fact, I did offer some insight here for future reports that are written where, for example, Indigenous voices there's policy statements that say they should be at the table, and yet there are so few Indigenous colleagues from around the world to be deployed on every committee. They've been marginalized for so long. So I think what the comment that I offered is you have to make sure that the non-Indigenous colleagues who are co-writing those chapters and documents are trained to understand why this is such an important policy statement. So I am really grateful that York has brought in enhanced and improved equity, diversity, and inclusion training for staff and professors. And we, of course, have that incredible course at the University of Alberta, massive online open course, Indigenous Canada, which I checked the other day, and 500,000 people since it was launched, I think 3 or 4 years ago, have registered to take it.
Wow.
And I hope those are a lot of my colleagues who are York professors. Although, you know what, I have to say, when I was talking to the professor who is the U.S. Special Envoy on indigeneity, he's a professor. He said, oh, yeah, I know people at York. He goes, yeah, York, you're like totally known for all that progressive critical thinking. And I said, he said, oh, yeah, I've been there. It's so good. And I looked at him, I said, we're trying. I wouldn't say we're there yet. So that was really nice to hear this very positive vibe. I never imagined I would hear it at the United Nations.
I know, it really is a small world and wonderful to hear. We've talked a little bit about what we can do internally to make the experience of somebody who's already at York and may have a diverse background or a diverse way of thinking be welcome. But what can York University do to attract a more diverse student body, faculty members, support staff?
I think we already have a very culturally diverse student body and faculty. I would like to see it more diverse. So I think that what we need to do is put in place as many supports as possible that for our colleagues who are representing, who are coming from equity-seeking, marginalized groups, to make sure that they succeed. We cannot put the burden for them to be getting research grants and being on all these committees. I think we have to set them up for success. I think there can be too much pressure on those kinds of students and faculty and staff to be everywhere, doing everything at once. I would say listen to them and support them, because for students, they're going to be here for 4 years, and we have to understand some of the home situations that they may be facing. We have to be understanding of that. But for our colleagues who could be around for 20 to 30 years, we don't want them to burn out. I think we have to be careful about burnout, especially during the past 3 years. I think I would say, I don't know about you, Tim, but I think a lot of people are very tired.
I don't know what you're saying. I'm surely I look refreshed, but I think I take your point.
Oh, you look fantastic, but I mean mentally.
I'm joking, but it in some ways it was harrowing, and in other ways it was really exhilarating, right?
Yes.
The thing that I enjoyed most about it was that I had this kind of experience with faculty members, with students, with staff that I wouldn't necessarily interact with. We all came together during that time. It really was, from that perspective, an invigorating time.
Yes. Yeah, it really was. I mean, I never, to be honest, I never felt more present at York University than 2.5 years, because you were either at home or you were on Zoom. Like, you didn't have anywhere else to be. And I was like, wow. And I was online a lot for students, because students were really, like, in many ways during that time, professors and staff on Zoom, we were like their frontline contacts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So I got, and I will say that the students who took my virtual courses online and who I got to know virtually, some of them I have never yet met in person. Some I met in person at one of the convocations where students that had convocated in 2021, like, could come back. I think that was last year, 2022. The university did that, and I met people in person for the first time. They still reach out to me. And I think that my experience gave the lie to the notion that you cannot get to know people and forge genuine relationships entirely virtually, that this is not possible to do. I certainly did. Yeah. Somebody
Absolutely.
the other day.
I had that experience.
Well, you were just saying we haven't met yet. Like, we haven't met
exactly, but I feel like we have. And this reminds me of we had a retreat at the end of COVID, or when it was mostly abated, and I had a professor say, "It's so nice to meet you." I didn't realize we hadn't met. I felt like I knew him that well. Anyway, yeah. We're at the final question, and thank you for a wonderful conversation. This has been terrific. Your one final question.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm getting out of here in a minute if you need me to vacate. Oh, lovely. I call them the house elf fairies. They come in and they fix all the rooms. So you can see there's this, right?
All right.
And when people speak in session, they move these things. And then these amazing people come in, and they have a way of measuring everything is put back perfectly. If only we could have that at York University in the rooms, or students could be trained. Sorry, go ahead. Last question.
Well, because I can see you're about to be ushered out. So my last question is, your Twitter bio has the slogan, Mihi Cura Futuri. What does that mean?
I learned that from an internet translator. It means the future concerns me greatly. At least I hope it means that. I did do 3 years of Latin, so I should. But it means the future concerns me greatly. And so I would say I am very concerned about the future. I know I'm not going to live eternally, but I would like to think that young people today will face a kinder future. It was recently my birthday, and someone was saying, "What do you want?" And I said something like, "World peace, and for people to respect the research on climate change and biodiversity loss." And I was like, "And I'm here at the United Nations, and I'm not sure how it's going, but this is a good place to be."
Absolutely.
To help that happen.
Yeah. Well, thank you for helping make that happen. My guest today was Dr. Dawn Bazely. Thank you, Dawn, for being on the show.
Thank you, Tim. And I'm hoping that more York University students, faculty and staff will get to this particular part of the United Nations in the future, and that I'll have opened a gateway for them to do it.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to Inclusive Conversations, Empowering Voices, a program celebrating and promoting equity, diversity, and inclusion. Produced by the NSERC Create Programs, TABES, and Smart Art, in association with the Lassonde School of Engineering at York University.